is Jessica McPhail. I'm the director of the Racine Public Library, and this is an informational program on gender identity. And for me, this is important because when I first started to volunteer years ago at a suicide prevention hotline, I learned to my dismay that a number of young men and women were not born in the body that they felt comfortable in, and those are our most vulnerable people. So I'm really pleased to be able to present this program of information, and I hope you have some questions. And now I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Thank you very much for coming. Lots of applause, please.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here to talk about this, although sometimes these subjects require, I actually decided on the way in here, while other people can run away from me, I can't really run away from myself. I'm like, I am who I am, and that's an interesting concept, determining who one is. But my name is Cassie, or Stephanie Cassandra, or nickname Steffers, or my original name or other name in my other iteration is Steve Platt. And I just realized now that my recent struggles to use a new computer and switch from Mac to PC mimic the gender sex role conundrums that many people face. For every yes, there is a no. And then again, anything to do with sex and gender is far more interesting and tangled than just what computer you use. So this is actually better. But anyway, have patience. This field is developing as I am as a person. My first such presentation on this situation is this one, but it's only one of my countless presentations in heels, wedges, sandals, flats, dresses, tops, bottoms, slacks, and makeup in life. And interrupt me anytime. I know there's a huge audience, but anytime if you have a question, stop me, I'll try and answer it. And there are two very different narratives one can present in this sort of thing, and that's one of the problems. Terms like narrative are very academic. There's this narrative, there's that. But anyway, there's the personal narrative, which is what I've done and who I am and how I've come to this point. And then there's the academic narrative, which is very different. The attempt in language, sometimes even in hard science, to determine what sex is, what gender is, who's a what basis will we put this on. Personally, I've always gone, at least always, I've lately gone with the idea that everyone should be able to self-identify without proof. Basically, if you're in the class or group that's considered to be normal, you don't have to explain it. And I'm not sure why people who are not fitting into that sort of system must explain or understand who they are to be allowed to be it. You're just who you are, and that's where you are. So very different than the academic study, and about half the stuff I'll present is sort of me from the personal sense, and half will be from the academic sense. Now I'm glad this is being recorded, because I'll remember how to say this should I ever do it again. So cross-dressers particularly are in a Netherland that requires and demands self-understanding and transmittal to that understanding to others before acceptance will be given. At least that's what most people say. They say, I don't understand you, explain yourself. And then I'm supposed to be able to, based on my understanding of myself, which I think no people have. No one knows why they're whatever they are. But I'm supposed to be able to explain it to them, and then they can say whether they accept or tolerate or don't accept, although hopefully they won't want to kill me like happens often, and won't drive me to suicide, which also happens often. So let's see, there are many language-based hatreds and defenses are called for, but we fight this battle in and with our lives and bodies. We demand tolerance and acceptance whether we understand ourselves or not. Categories have been said to exist to ease anxiety, but in breaking them, we cause anxiety, and that is part of the reason why cross-dressers being of one gender but another sex are least accepted, I think, of all the categories that exist now. Let's see. When collecting money from kids, when I was a teacher, we do some of these things where you would put money into the girls' box or the boys' box and see which group gave more. I would tell them to put the dollars in the one you think you are, the one others think you are, or the one you wish others saw you as, or the one you like the best, or the one you wish you were, or the one you most desire physical contact with. Think of all of these as sex or gender-based distinctions. I needed more categories than I ever used. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
I'm already causing an explosion in the force, right? So something's happening here, but we don't know what it is. Again, categories exist to ease anxiety in a seamless and apparently chaotic world. Being male or female is, in some people's minds, including myself, a performance or a role. Playing the role requires suppression of other characteristics within the individual that do not fall within the logical limits of that role. People, to limit their anxiety, will suppress any who cross role boundaries and cause the blurring in the mythic categories society has created. I remind people in the New Testament, the opening words are, "In the beginning was the Word." And the word that people use is basic to most of our hatreds. You know, we determine definitions like white, black, Christian, Muslim, whatever. Everyone picks something to be, and then the people who are not that often hate them. So, let me keep going. I have this interesting test. Just who do you think you are?
May I turn off the microphone and then we won't anymore.
Feedback. Okay. This is just who do you think you are, and there's a gender aptitude test, and includes lots of interesting questions. When you see someone on the street whose gender is unclear, you could say sex too, how do you react? A, honestly, with some combination of revulsion, pity, and bewilderment. B, I try to figure out if it's a man or a woman. C, I mentally do a makeover that a person can pass better as one or the other. And D, I probably notice the person is staring at me trying to figure out what I am. So, and I guess this is something I picked up from, this was an explorer in Canada who had come from Iceland in the early days. And when I first saw the monument to him, I thought, this is the most stupid statement I have ever seen on a monument. But then as time passed, I realized it was actually the best statement I'd ever seen. And what it says is, I know what I have experienced, and I know what it has meant to me. That, I think, is the goal of most human life, and not that easy to come by. When I was a young kid, I think I had a picture somewhat like this. I took this one in Russia. This is a Russian woman walking, and if you look, sort of hiding in the background is her little boy. And I think those kind of things I noticed led to some sort of identification for myself. Now, people have used at the same time transgendered people can be hated, and I've had problems like in Racine in terms of ushering. I guess I could mention the group is the Racine Theater Guild. I never thought that would be a problem there, but it was, and that was at the same time they were doing the show, Rocky Horror Show, with a transgender person in the role. Actually, very strange. But society makes these things in some ways popular and acceptable. And these are two guys who started, and it's two guys, two men, in terms of sex. I'll go back to sex versus gender. They started the Twitter feed about 2 years ago called Shit Girls Say, and it became incredibly popular. But both of them are actually sexually men. If we ask how many sexes are there, there's something approaching 6. It's hard to tell. Depends what you mean by sex. Usually means genetic based, not based on some interpretation, but on a scientific analysis. And among the ones there are of course, male, which is XY, female, which is XX. Then there's other ones like XXY, YXX, XXS. There's also even X. And so there are something like 6 to 9 sexes named that way. I thought I'd do this almost randomly. This is a short story from a Jewish newspaper where they're talking about the holiday Hanukkah and like, when's it okay to dress as the other sex? And in Jewish religion, really it's not okay. But for Hanukkah, it's perfectly okay. So this was a rabbi who had a son, and the son said, "Papa, I'll wear the dress." "But you're a boy," he said. But then later on, because it was this holiday, it becomes okay. These are female impersonators who did comedy. This is, well, who's aware? People think this thing is not so common, but who's one of the most famous? There's only 2 such people who released most of the secret information from the NSA recently. One is still in Russia, where he's in prison. Is free, and the other one was Bradley Manning, who was in the United States and is now in prison for I forget how many years. And of course, Bradley Manning, one of only 2 people, announces he's transgender right away, possibly transsexual. Gender is based on people's presentation of themselves. And their understanding of themselves. Sex is based on the something biological in them. They're 2 completely separate things. Recently, Facebook has started to change its ways, allowing people to self-classify from male, female, and a couple other things like straight, gay. Now Facebook allows 51 gender options. And those 51 gender options could be doubled because they could each go with a different sex. So there's actually 102 gender sex options, and if you're going to have a relationship with someone, any one of those could have it with any of the other ones. So you have 102 times 102, or about, what is that, 100 times 10 is 1,000, 10,000 possible sex couplings. Yeah, you don't have to try them all though. Yeah. No, go ahead if you have a question.
I guess my answer is on a sheet of paper. I was going to say, could you read some of them?
Yeah, and you can always, there's too much. Just to present those 51 would take an hour and a half. So it's like people have to go and look them up. Again, as far as these things are unacceptable, discrimination and legal status. The majority of respondents to the National Transgender Discrimination Survey chose a gender not listed here. Let's see, the majority who did. Respondents reported 9% more likely to forgo health care due to discrimination than the general sample. 36%, 76% reported being unemployed, 90% reported experienced transgender bias at work, and 43% reported having attempted suicide at least once. And of course, the people who succeeded, they weren't there to answer the questions. The White House was recently petitioned by 60,000 people to legally recognize non-binary genders. So again, have 60,000, which is only a small portion of the number that there must be in the United States. Anyway, and here's an article about that. Genderqueer is a classification. Again, if you look in Wikipedia, it's non-binary for all gender identities other than man and woman, which themselves are problematic. Let's see, genderqueer people may identify as one or more of the following: having overlap of or indefinite lines between gender identity and romantic and sexual orientation, two or more genders. Some people see themselves as bigender, trigender, even pangender. Some see themselves as non-gendered, genderless, agender, neutrosis. Some move between genders with a fluctuating gender identity. Those are gender fluid people. And third gender or other gendered people include those who do not place a name to their gender. A gender, yeah. Let's see, cis. There's a term cisgender, which is, or cis, a person is cisgender, which tends to mean that you are both look like a man and present yourself as a man and are genetically a man. And then some people reading that sees the term cisgender as a slur on transgender people. They want to know why non-trans people are not, while people who are normal are not called non-trans, as opposed to trans people have to be renamed to be trans something else. Am I making sense here? Okay, so this is about cisgender. This person here is someone I had seen in a play, Kiki and Herb, a play in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago. It's Justin Vivian Bond, who identifies as neither male or female, it says, but trans. He prefers the title MX and the pronoun V instead of he, she. So, this is Neil Patrick Harris. I think everybody knows him from the Doogie Howser days. He's playing in a new edition of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So that again is Neil Patrick Harris, who I guess is gay in real life, but he's one of the few gay people to be able to cross the barrier and play both the romantic lead. In fact, my mother, How I Met Your Mother, he plays a sort of womanizing guy. Here's a picture of Roger Hansen on this side, who's attempting to look like, I don't know what you can say. Again, you have to use the terms. A cool female, an attractive female. Here's Madonna in a pose that I think is meant to undercut her use as a sort of gender character that people would pay huge amounts of money to see. The Australian Passport Office now has new guidelines for issuing passports with a new gender. They've broadened the availability of an X descriptor to all individuals with documented indeterminate sex. The revised policy said sex reassignment surgery is not a prerequisite to issue a passport. Some places have eliminated the use of sexual reassignment because they see it as a manipulation of the body to meet the need of society to have everyone be in a simple category. If you're going to be a male, you should have male organs. If you're going to be a female, you should have female organs. And I don't know if that's not really right. Yeah, here's a few pictures of myself. Some of these are at various points in my life. This one has an Edward Hopper picture that's called Evening Wind, and it shows, I think, how a lot of transgender people feel. This picture was done in a bar here with a group I play mahjong with. This was me at a school library. This is me when I was teaching, and we had some gender crossing days. This is the other me, and this is the other me with my first daughter, when I was this tough guy with a knife and a motorcycle, and then more pictures teaching. Some of these I look at, I wonder myself. This one was me at a friend's house. This one was at me taken by myself. Of course, I'm too proper to let anyone photograph me in a bra and panties, I think. And this is me when I was teaching with some role models. And this was me in that classroom with this fellow who's very bright, very conservative, libertarian, but he could barely look at me. This is a list of movies that involve cross-dressing and gender bender. It goes all together. There were the wide released ones grossed over $1 billion, and the average was $50 million each for each of these movies that dealt with gender bending. People identifying outside the gender binary are more likely to be unemployed, have experienced physical assault, been denied medical care for their binary identification, transgender counterparts, compared to for their binary identifying counterparts, who just identify as what they look like. And again, lots of interest in this as far as entertainment and earning money. This is a male opera group that does opera in playing roles of women, with men playing roles of women. This is a story about the new preferred pronouns. How many people have heard of those? Pronouns other than he, she, and so on. There's just a plethora of those now, and in some ways it's like that thing I was saying before. This is developing very quickly. No idea where all of this will end up. The article I looked up about the petition to the White House had a little sidebar about a kid somewhere who was, and I showed his picture. He looked very attractive, but he wasn't allowed to have his driver's license photo taken with makeup. They would only do it if he removed all his makeup. These things go back for years. This is a play based on a hotel in the Catskills that in the 20s, 30s, and 40s were where husbands and fathers found fellowship in the 1960s, dressing and acting as women. One might say, how do women act? And of course, most of the things that distinguish women from men were very based on, patronizing ideas, particularly toward women, but toward men too. Women were caring, men were uncaring. Women were not aggressive, men were aggressive. Is this true of all the men or women None of these distinctions can matter. The way things have changed in recent dictionaries is if you look up women or you look up men, you say having characteristics pertaining to men or having, and then you say, well, what are those characteristics? They don't really do any of them anymore, because what are you going to say? Men are good soldiers, women aren't, when women are clearly good soldiers at this point. What can you say about any of it? So men are not nurturing, women are nurturing. Is that true? Is it a general truth? So I wonder what... this is me and my Mahjong group. So in terms of being accepted around Racine and so on, or in the world, what I found to my shock, because this had started with me when I was a teen, was that when you come out and you say, I'm going to do what I want to do, most people don't care. They don't care either way. You lose some friends. I lost my most important friend, actually, because of that, which is sort of tragic. But then again, as someone else said to me, you can't really live a lie. And sometimes I think, oh yeah, you should live a lie if the being who you are is going to cause you all this problem. It's something that people who look different from the category they want to be in face. So anyway, this is my Mahjong group here, and this is myself and some of my students. They were all, I mean, I don't know if I ran into any real students, any students who really, most of them, when I would ask them to vote, which presentation do you like better, the girl or the boy presentation, would say the girl. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, oh, you're hotter. So, and I think this carries a lot. This is Madonna again, and this is Madonna in her oy vey's mir mode, like, you know, what she has to deal with. And I think everyone of any gender or gender appearance has to deal with these same things. This was me at an Ani DeFranco concert. I don't know how many people know Ani, but, and this is a book of photography. It's Our Rose is Our Rose is Our Rose, and gender performance in photography, which is very much done in terms of famous, like here's Nan Golden. I don't know if you know Nan Golden. You just have to look up what she does. You can see the same thing. There's, of course, Mapplethorpe. Who else? Della Grace. Yeah, here's, remember her? Who is she? I forgot.
Grace Jones?
What?
Grace Jones?
Yeah, Grace Jones. Yeah, yeah. Things, you know. And if you go now in Milwaukee to Pride Fest, among the entertainers they have are the Milltown Kings, which are women who like to appear as men. And it's really, it was interesting to me. I went to a tutorial on how you're supposed to do it, and it's like every thing that a cross-dressing male does to look like a woman, you just do the opposite. So that if you're a woman who wants to look like a man, you bind your breasts so that they're flatter. You know, you pad yourself a little more in the middle so you look straighter. And of course, for men, you pad yourself to have bigger hips, to have a bigger butt, you know, and you definitely have to add something to have breasts. What all of this means, I mentioned to one of my woman friends once that sometimes I feel like, look how absurd this is. I'm walking around with these foam breasts. And she says, well, you don't know how many of these women around you are walking around with the same foam breasts. And I thought, well, that was sort of interesting. That's someone who has often told me how sad she was that for biological reasons she could never have babies, and I tried to make it clear to her that men can't have babies either, and many of them are, I think, just as distraught over that, and maybe just as angry over that. So that may be why, you know, one of the bases of sexism against women. I don't know, what else do I have? I think I'm getting close. This is a book I got actually from Mark, The Spirit in the Flesh, about two-hearted people who are men and women in Indian culture. This is Vested Interests. Marjorie Garber is a Harvard professor who spends a lot of time writing about why cross-dressing causes so much cultural unrest. This is an earlier book on Observing the Erotic Imagination. This is a truly great novel, which I think goes counter to half the stuff I've been saying. The Regiment of Women depicts a society in which men have come to dress and act like women to survive, so that they talked about a secretary, you know, with heels and a nice-looking butt and nylons, and says the only problem is Georgie is actually George, not Georgie. He's actually a male. And that is a great book, really interesting. And this is Kate Bornstein. She gives hope to a lot of people. She's a Jewish male who was became a transsexual female, so she had her gender, and she switched her gender and her sex, and she calls herself gender outlaw on men, women, and the rest of us, because the rest of us is many people. And one of her books is 101 Alternative to Suicide for Teens, Freaks, and Other Outlaws. And it says, "Hello, Cruel World." And she's very important, I think, to a lot of people. You can actually look up 100 reasons why not to kill yourself. Why is a book like this necessary? Because a lot of people actually do kill themselves on these issues. This is a great one I found in a bookstore in Manhattan, Redressing the Canon. And it means redressing, making it better, and redressing, changing the clothing. And it deals mainly with transgender presentations in Shakespeare, which go back to Shakespeare and occur in half of his plays, and to discussing, the idea that in medieval times you couldn't have a woman on the stage, so the men played the women. In the Japanese culture, you would have women in the kabuki and so on. And there came to be a time when the women were so attractive to the samurai in the audience that those samurai all started to fight and kill each other to get those women. And the Japanese theater came up with the idea, wait, we'll have boys play those roles. So they switched it to what most of us know, which is having boys play those roles. And within a short time, of course, the samurai were all killing each other to get at those boys. And I guess if Jolie is here, this is a book I got it's from PFLAG, Parents, Families and Friends of Gays and Lesbians. And of course, I just had someone tell me that one of her best friends is a lesbian, and she's a lesbian herself. And that person, when you talk about Stonewall, most of you probably know about Stonewall and see it as an advance, where gay people fought back. Particularly, some people say cross-dressing males, but also drag queens. A drag queen is a gay male who dresses as a woman. A cross-dressing male is just a male who dresses as a woman but is heterosexual, for God knows what reason any of these things are. And of course, we don't ask the sort of normative people, why are you the way you are? It's just, oh yeah, that must be how everyone is. So anyway, she said that to her friend, Stonewall was a terrible thing because it was where gay people seized control of the movement to have, sexual and gender freedom, so that you have now gay marriage. And then she said, no one has ever heard the term lesbian marriage. It's like gay marriage now includes lesbian marriage between two lesbians. That almost goes back to the days when people were fighting to get someone to say he, she, or men and women, or people, instead of always just saying the male, and reassuring everyone that, oh, that includes the woman, which of course it doesn't really. Anyway, I don't know, do I have more to say? I don't know.
It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I don't know. If you have any questions about my life, so for me, it started when I was a teenager and was kept buried, but would reappear, particularly as I reappear, other than when I was totally alone, would reappear many times over the years, like on various Halloweens, going back to when I lived in California, which was till 81, going back to the 60s in New York, on holidays, going back to various parties with friends and others over the years, and then coming out most strongly when I was teaching here at a high school that had a gender bender day, which made it like acceptable. I mean, even the police at the school, did it. It's hard to know. You never know who's pretending to be what they really are. It's interesting. So anyway, I don't know what else to say. Getting acceptance can be hard. Like I have two daughters, and a stepdaughter. The stepdaughter is fine with all this. She has been going back to the 1960s. My wife was older than I am, and she's 10, 15 years older than my biological kids. Amongst my biological kid, one is accepting, the other one is very upset with herself for not being accepting. I think she doesn't know where she got this idea to not, because she's so accepting. She has, gay rights, that equal sign, stickers on her car, in spite of what people in the banking industry where she works might say. But she still has problems with it. My parents, I just have a vague idea that my mother had some idea of it. I remember at one time I was trying to get psychotherapy for something or other, probably teenage angst or early college angst, and it was like, we don't know if we want to spend money on that. So I said, look, I like dressing in women's clothing, and I thought that would convince them, we should pay money on this. So my mother says, well, who cares what you do in your own home? So that didn't work. I had to go back to just being like somehow mentally ill or something. It's life is a struggle, and for some more than others. I've had so one thing I've noticed is, you can be transgender and borderline personality disorder, or, manic depressive or depressive. You can be all those things together, and it's not necessarily an easy road to hoe. It's nicer to be normative gender, normative sex, and 25-year-old still, which I'm not anymore, so I'm a lot older than that now. And, it's a lot easier to be the normative than what is the not normal. And I've come to feel for a long time the way TV presents things, and it's starting to show, there's a sort of privileging of, I think, in our society, in terms of people's understanding of what's not necessarily the most powerful thing, but the most attractive thing, it has to be a teenage girl. So nothing is as attractive to most people as a teenage girl, whether men, or as interesting, whether men or women. But of course, we all know that power can go in quite a different way from attractiveness. It's a conundrum, and a very difficult one. Who is everyone, and who do we allow, and who don't we allow, and who do we privilege, and who don't we privilege? And a lot of people, I think, fall by the wayside. So, and that of course goes to even to the much more widely accepted nowadays idea of being a gay male or a gay female. That's a category I think most people can sort of deal with. It's these, unusual crossing of gender lines and using prefixes other than he, she. That's more of a problem for society. Yeah, any questions of any sort? And then
I was just going to say that people...
Is this going to be another attack?
No, people know that I am friends with you.
Yeah.
And some people, it's like you said, people want you, getting to know you would want to just explain, because I had never thought of the idea of sex and gender as separate before until I had discussions with you. And no, I just never, I never really thought about it much, and I think it's really, it helps a lot to understand that, and that someone might say, well, why don't people like that go just dress up in private? But that would be like, why should anybody have to go dress up in private to do anything? It doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of discrimination, and like you said, misunderstanding.
Very culturally determined, and I forgot how many. The place that had more gender terms than even Facebook has now is amongst the Tamil people in Sri Lanka. Who would ever think that? Or amongst Native Americans with this two hearts business, and the people who were often the seers, were seen as both genders. It really depends, yeah. And I have problems with the question, how can one answer those questions? Oh, why don't you just do it in private? Why do you have to do it outside? It's hard to say. You can make all these arguments for why you want to do it. And then you're back to and I always feel with the use of words, there's more confusion. The more I explain myself, the further away I get from what's actually happening. You make it more academic and less personal, less real. Because academia can take, there's no position you can't find in academia. Pro anti-Marx, pro anti-capitalism. And if you just listen to them, they always each one sounds perfect in and of itself, even though it excludes all the other readings of the system. So who knows? Yeah.
I've got a question
Yeah.
for anyone in the audience. If somebody is a parent of a child who's questioning their identity, that's a really tough thing. You're trying to, and I'm not, but I've read a lot, but you're trying to get support, not just for your child being the whole person they're meant to be, but to fight the system that is so binary.
Yeah, it's. I was just reading a little about the question of what to do with kids that self-identify, but at a time they're 2 or 3, as being the other gender, and that in the older days could often lead to, essentially, I know this isn't a value-laden term, bodily mutilation to make the two match. And some people didn't want to do that anymore, so doctors pulled out. Others think it's just right. Some people now think if your child is performing as the other gender, you should start doing things early before puberty to prevent them from coming more into conflict with themselves. Like you might want to block certain hormones or treat with other hormones. And I think these are horrible questions, but basically, and as a scientist, I taught chemistry and physics for many years. I understand what science understands, and a lot of people, what people think science understands isn't really understood. Some of the simplest things, like the idea of mass, is not on, why do masses attract? We really don't have any idea. We just make up this stuff because here I drop this so the earth attracts it. But, what's attracting what? We just name it all. But science cannot resolve these questions. So you end up with people who are having an incredible conundrum, and almost whatever they do has a 50-50 chance of being the wrong thing or the right thing. And who wouldn't want to be in that circumstance? So you have boys who were seen as girls by their doctors and then pushed a little more to be like girls, who then later on decide something's wrong, and when they're 20, they want to go back to what they still see as their, basic selves. And then there'll be other kids who are probably better off having had some manipulation going on earlier so they can be more in touch, and the operation becomes, the operations to put them in consonance with their desires are not as dangerous. Who can decide any of this? Boy, it's almost like, parents pick religions for their kids all the time, and do we always pick the right religion? I don't really know. There's so many people who convert one to another. What's a parent to do? It's Karl Marx's question. What is the problem here? Yeah.
In the Spirit and the Flesh about the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't have reassignment surgery, but then again, I don't know as they needed it, given culturally they accepted.
Right.
And so, I think in our culture, because it's so binarily oriented, it puts people thinking that they have to choose a side and things like that. And such people think, well, I need, surgery to correct things, and I guess it's just another symptom of our society's
Yeah.
problem.
Correct things that
Because
are...
another society, namely the
Yeah,
Native Americans, didn't have a problem.
right.
And therefore, the quote, crossing type people didn't have a problem either because their society didn't have a problem.
Right, right. It's some people still, or now, still see gender or sex reassigned. It depends again, gender is sort of what you look like, sex is your physical body, see the attempt to bring them into conformity with one another to make everyone sort of cis. You got to be male appearing, male sex, female appearing, female sex, as essentially sexual mutilation for a non-disease. And medicine is not supposed to be correcting things that are not a disease. If people were less pushed by their society, they could possibly be happier. But in a way, we make progress on these things. Are we going to, that would be nice if people could do that about religion and race and whatever, I guess I'm always for economic class distinctions. Those, I think, are a worthy source of hatred, So, but not everyone feels that way. So, I don't know. Yeah, thanks. That's essentially what I was saying by this business of, the categories exist to ease anxiety. There could have been other ways it were done, but we have, maybe going back to Aristotle, A is A and A is not B. We have such a binary culture, that we just try to push everything into that. Everything has to have a yes, no, an up, down, a 0, 1. Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions. They're kind of like in the same family. Okay, so how do you address someone if you know that they're not the, male, female, some people want to say standard, but if you just see a random person on the street or if it's like a customer, what prefix do you use? Do you just say, sir, ma'am,
Yeah.
what I mean? Would they get offended if you don't know, or is it something that someone has to say so then you address them how they want to be?
I've run into this myself, and I could tell you how I feel when I'm dressed like this. I want to be addressed as ma'am, she. When I'm dressed like a male, I want to be addressed as sir, he, and the people who are easily offended are going to be offended no matter what you do. But I think for most people, if you address them as what they appear, it's true, you will sometimes be saying ma'am to a guy. Or in the days when guy was only used for males. So in some ways you can't you could always say, well, even if you say to someone, how would you like to be addressed? I mean, I've said to people who know me, like at the bank, they know me for many years in one role, and when I come to them in another role and they say, Steve, I say, no, it's Cassie, and it's she now. And I don't get offended, but you never know. There's people who are easily offended or easily offended. So you just have to try. Because I either really look male, or I think now I really look female, don't I? Yeah, so the only thing I haven't done so far, I did get new glasses to fit. The only thing I haven't done is get my voice changed, at least as far as I want to go. There are people who shave down their Adam's apples, and I'm not really a big fan of surgery for pretty much anything unless you're really, really sick. So, physically sick. So, I don't know. I think your heart is in the right place, and you'll just have to try and ask people if they're ambiguous, or if they correct you, don't get angry at them. Just say, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, ma'am, or whatever. Because you never know. I could be offended either way if I was offendable.
I would
type
say never use
person.
the word ma'am.
What?
I'm just,
Yeah.
I hate to
Yeah.
just, I
A
don't.
lot of women
Women
wouldn't
don't.
like ma'am
That makes
either,
me feel
so I don't know. But if you say Ms., and then there are people like that fellow I passed around, who was it? Kiki, and Kiki, Julian something, whatever his name is, he wants to be called MX and wants to be referred to as V instead of he or she. Do V want a piece of pizza? So it's hard. What was your other question? I don't know if
Okay,
that helps.
so-
Does that help?
No, it does. Like
Does-
if somebody, let's say, looks like a male or female, but is like gender neutral or agender or whatever, people will still see them as like a he or a she. But is it worth it to classify yourself as agender or gender neutral when no one really knows? Because then it's just like your own little, only you
Well-
know about it. So is it like, should you just stay, how people see you?
I guess I don't feel that, maybe it's because I have some libertarianism in me. People should be able to be free to be who they are and to determine their own way to be addressed. This goes back to the days of Ms., when it was long before your time, when it was Mr. and Mrs. and Miss, so that if it was Mr., you never knew if the person was married or not. If it was a woman, you'd say Miss and they weren't married, or Mrs. and they were married. And a lot of women fought to get the Mrs. replaced by Ms., MZ. And it's the same kind of question. People want to be identified in the way they want to be identified. So I don't know. It'd be less trouble for the people who are, certainly be less trouble for the society, but maybe it would be another nail in the coffin of self, of people who are weakly identified with themselves and are self-hating or self-abusive, and all they really don't need is yet another sign of non-acceptance. Certainly another sign of non-acceptance from someone like you who is sensitive to these issues. Of course, there's other people you never convince. So when I've talked about, I don't really care about all the genetic arguments, because those are so wrapped in science and have so much difficulty with them to figure that out. It's not all as simple as it seems, so I'm more for, an appearance is clearly wrong, and so I'm more for self-identification and everything, and just sort of leave it at that. Let people be who they are and present themselves as they want, and leave them alone. But I gather in Iran now, even under the current system, they allow transsexual surgery. They've decided that's actually okay. So you never can tell about a society but I think the best thing is always more freedom and respect for the individual, more decency, to less want people to hide. And one can think, you're young, do you have kids yet? Or
No.
No, when you have kids, do you want them to be who they are, or do you want them to present as people want them to present? I think a lot of people would say present as people want them to present. They wouldn't say it, but that's what they mean. But like my daughter, maybe one of them may be upset with how I present myself, but honestly, I didn't care if she was straight or gay or any of these other 50 or so gender categories. So, and I guess I still think that's a better way. But it's like in another world, it doesn't happen much in the world. So we all have to contribute as good as we can to it. Like one of my friends says, haters are gonna hate, and if you take the inverse of that, decent people are gonna be decent, and it's important to make that point always. You know, I'm a decent person. I'm not gonna be part of this kind of oppression or discrimination. I don't know, does that help? I don't know. It's always hard to tell what to say to anyone, because you never know what's going on in their minds. So yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
Kind of a trivial, what year roughly is the motorcycle photo?
That would be when I first got to Berkeley in '64. And that's, of course, I did have that motorcycle. I did have that leather jacket. I bought that leather jacket possibly 5 years before when I was in New York, in Brooklyn, going to high school, because it was like, of course, Fonzie came much later, but, you know, it was a type of presentation that was sort of inherently cool. I don't know how many people have seen Lords of Flatbush with both, I think Fonzie is in it, and Sylvester Stallone, and it's all about kids who dress that way. It's an early movie before either of them. So I bought it then because I always used to think, I used to dream, I had two main dreams. One was being the head of a gang and being the smart one who told them what to do, but probably somehow I would have made good things happen. And the other one was dressing effectively as a female and being accepted as a sort of honorary woman. Those were two of my big dreams. And then there's the third one, which was to be the leader of the young people's resistance to the Russian invasion, like in Red Dawn. I don't know how many people have seen, have you seen the original Red Dawn?
I know of it.
Yeah, it's worth seeing. Yeah, it's worth seeing. That's another dream, at least I had as a kid. So you have all these sort of conflicting dreams. I didn't think of being the leader of the revolution, but being in a dress. But I could have, because there was like Rosa Luxemburg and so on, but that was a little too mixed up for even me, so I kept the dreams sort of separated a bit. Yeah, I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I got that in Berkeley. I rode that motorcycle. I did have that switchblade knife, but I had bought it in Mexico, and I did have to smuggle it into the US, but it wasn't a very effective switchblade. It was the kind where you pressed the button and the blade popped out, but if you went to stab someone with it, it was just as likely that it would fold on you and chop your finger off. But it looked like and I didn't really smoke, but the cigarette seemed better, and I guess some of it was modeled on Marlon Brando in The Wild Ones, whatever, which I think was pre that period. Yeah. And of course there were lots of Hell's Angels around in those days in California, and this is before angel dust, so they weren't all bad. They were still being asked to guard the Rolling Stones at Altamont, but that was the beginning of the end, I think, when they killed some kid at Altamont. The Hells Angels and the peace people started to separate, whereas before that, Allen Ginsberg and Sonny Barger, the head of the local Hells Angels, were just like this, but without polish. So I don't know. Are you still filming?
I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I wanted to say one thing.
Yeah.
My experience at the Suicide Prevention Hotline made me really sensitive to how we shove people into these two categories.
Yeah.
And so when I was raising my children, I would refer to when you meet your life partner instead of when you get married or when you have a wedding. And I didn't realize
the weddings would come.
how overwhelming it was from everybody else that was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, my mother-in-law, my mother, everybody we knew talked to our kids about, well, when you get married and when your wife or when your husband. And I kept saying, let's just use the phrase life partner because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Until my youngest was 18 and he said, Mom, will you please get it into your head? None of us are gay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. But I felt I'd done my job. And here at the library, we decided to eliminate the click you here if you're male, click here if you're female on our library card application form. We don't have anything.
Oh,
So that nobody has to fumble for a driver's license
Yeah.
that says one thing when they are presenting as
yeah,
another.
as
I
another.
think if we are just aware of these kinds of simple things, they do have an impact. And after 18 years of being told that I'd be happy with whatever life partner they might choose, to have them say, Mom, I'm not gay. All right. But they could have just as easily said, well,
Yeah.
guess what?
Right,
I'm something else than what society says I am.
right.
So
Or
I
should
just
be.
Thank you so much for sharing your
Yeah,
story.
thanks.
I think it's an important subject and one that I hope we'll all be more sensitive to and be more comfortable with.
I was going to show you as far as comfort goes, you know, with women, of course, what is the big thing you go and buy? That you buy hundreds of?
Are you talking
Depending
about
on-
shoes or
Yes,
purses?
shoes, depending on the woman. So like I have these, and I have these, and I have these, and I have everything else in between. And and every type of sandal. And if someone thinks they can understand this, I wish them luck, because I don't know how any of it comes to be understood. And you know, the funny thing is too, it takes some effort to and it's definitely not, you know, plenty of women wear only pants and jeans and sneakers and no makeup and so on, and others don't. I love fashion magazines. I love all the stuff about clothing. Most of my women friends do not wear heels ever, too uncomfortable. I actually practiced with ones like this around the house after checking on the internet how to walk in heels. You know, one of the ways is to practice. And I practiced for a long time, and with ones about this high, you can definitely do ones like this, but not for as long. These I could wear for a day at a time with no trouble. The really high ones, you'd be like the other women, you know, taking them off when you can. So, and there are so many little characteristics of women that one notices, you know, from, of course, how you walk and sit, but even to this idea of having a shoe where your toe is in it and it's hanging down and you keep flipping it like this. Women do that all the time. Men never do it. So after a while, as you learn those things, they become fun things to do, however they originate. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm so grateful to you for all the library programs you've done over the years that I've been involved in and have come involved in actually participating or just come to see, and how advanced and open they are for probably anywhere on earth, but certainly for Racine. And Racine is somewhat worse than Milwaukee, is much more accepting. In Milwaukee, I usher, you know, in drag for music, theater, many things, and have never really had a problem. Never had a problem. So, and yeah. What,
Well, the
maybe I
first
should,
year that we had a display during June, which is Pride Month,
yeah.
the first year I had a phone call from one person, a male, who said to me, I see you have a big display of things about gays and lesbians. And I said, yes, we do. And he said, thank you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
with that kind of response, I'm not getting
Yeah.
any opposition.
Right.
People do want to know. They are concerned.
Yeah, I definitely wondered even tonight if there would be like, you know, anti-people here. So, like you can get it, certainly if this was done on global warming, you could get the other side, which is what I mean about the problems with science and the academy. No matter how true something is, there's always another side to be made.
Well, that's why we have civil discourse.
Yeah, somewhat civil.
It
yeah.
will be civil.
Yeah, it will be civil here, yeah. I forgot what I was reading about that's without government, there would be no civility, and that's why we have government, which a lot of people I don't think understand. You know, the people who see government as oppressive in a bad way. It's also oppressive, I think, in a good way. So, to protect people. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, anything else, or everyone okay?
Thank you so much, Cassie.
Oh, you're welcome.
No, I just wandered in. I found my books, and I thought I'd listen to the rest of what was going on. I couldn't believe that about the theater group, though. That is so bizarre.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
What was the rationale for that? Did they explain it to you, or?
Yeah, they explained it. It was explained. Maybe I shouldn't mention it, but I guess, yeah, that's sort of how I feel. Screw it, you know what I mean? Yeah, I wrote that it seems immoral to me that they benefit from these roles commercially, but do not allow them. And their arguments, and I don't mean to maximize my feeling or minimize their feelings, but you could have read the whole argument in terms of racism in the 1960s. We can't do this, our biggest supporters won't give us money. It's all the same kind of justification. It's never their racism, it's somebody else's racism, and we're going to cater to it, is essentially what they said. You know, other people will stop giving us money if we allow you to present as a cross-dresser. And, you know, I don't think that was a valid point in Germany in 1940, nor in, the South in 1960, nor here in 1990, whatever, or 2000, whatever the discrimination is based on. It struck me as just ridiculous. So I wrote a bunch of letters in response. I got their responses back, which, as I said, were very much like, oh, we got to have separate bathrooms, because for black, white, or male, female, God forbid, that, a male who's cross-dressing should go into a female bathroom. Some people, it's always some people would be. I've used female bathrooms when I'm in drag because it seems like bathrooms have that dress and pants look, and to me it's a gender, not a sex thing, and it's where am I most likely to be beaten up, which probably like other women, it's in the men's bathroom. Although when I go to the Oriental, they have a very strange bathroom system that puts all the men into this thing with a dozen urinals and a dozen stalls, and the women on the first floor get to go to what, unbeknownst to them until they used it, is a big room that has one toilet bowl in it. It's very, very strange.
I think I understand what you just said, but
Yeah.
I thought the women's official room was up way up.
Yes, the official one, yeah, but it's way up there and there's no direction to it. And so I keep saying to them, why don't you make that big room the one for people who want a unigender bathroom for one person at a time, and then make the big one downstairs for men and women who don't care, both men and women at the same time, who don't care, which most people actually don't, but they always say, oh, we're run by a company that's out of, there's always reasons for all of this. And, you can say this to a woman, a young woman who is herself gay or transgender or whatever, they'll still spout the party line. The party line is always the main line. So, I don't know. If you go to the Oriental, mention that to them, to make that single room just for the people who want to go to, what should you call it? A single gender bathroom. although it could be serial single gender, and then have the other one just be for both. And sometimes I've told women, there's no one in the men's room, why don't you all go liberate it? And every once in a while, you hit people who do, and in fact, every once in a while, you hit women who say, yeah, this is a lot of crap, I'm not going to stand here waiting to crap for the 10 people line ahead of me that gets one stall. And you can say, oh, you could go upstairs, but that's a long way. So once in a while, I know I went to a Britney Spears concert once at the what's that place? Summerfest grounds, the Marcus Amphitheater. And when I went to the male bathroom, I was male gendered that day. There were easy 100 women in there waiting online to use, as the men got in and out faster, to use those, whereas the line outside the door of the women's bathroom was immense. And in places like New York, no one would think twice about what bathroom they used. It's whichever one is least busy, and that's it. But anyway, it's interesting. But I think men may have more of a problem with this than women. I'm not completely sure. I don't know. It's very strange in our society, because you could see if a man goes into a women's room, he could probably be arrested. But if a woman went into a man's room, she probably wouldn't be arrested. She'd just be told to go somewhere else. I don't know. I don't make the argument for, like society is tilted toward women, because that's clearly not true. But there are very strange tiltings that go on here.
I think it might be the intimidation factor too, for women.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you're gonna go in there,
Yeah.
it's just gonna happen. You gotta face it.
Yeah, and you
You're
gotta
gonna
deal
be,
with it.
Hey, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
No, you don't want nobody.
Yeah, I agree with
If I go
that.
into a men's bathroom, there's a reason I'm going in there.
Yeah.
And I'm in that stall and I'm doing my business.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way it can cause a problem is if there are guys at the urinals and they're like, no. So,
Yeah, again, who controls in society, the most biased or the most free? I don't know. It's a conundrum, along with many other conundrums. When I've done that with women and there's a big line, I say, if you want, I'll walk in with you so that you can just walk behind me and go to the stalls and don't look at the urinals if that bothers you. But, people forget that 99% of the bathrooms in America are unisex, namely the home bathrooms. So I don't know. It's another question, and it's so socially determined. I don't know where we stand now, but there was the time when dormitories in many colleges had unisex bathrooms. Where both could use the same bathroom. And I don't know if that's still true anymore. I think we may have gone back a little on that. Do you know? I don't know.
I think we have gone back a little bit.
Yeah, on that, yeah. So it's strange. We have a society that puts so much energy into things like sex and race until that's gotten somewhat better recently, than into peace. No one really cares about, war is just fine and violence is just fine. But boy, sex, we gotta keep that straight. Yeah, it's very strange, yeah. And maybe that's why there are so few people here today. The average person already knows how they feel about all these things. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, should I stop?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming too.
Yeah.